Not. All right, everybody right now, right? Because we're going to start the cardiovascular system as soon as I find the right slide. Which should be... There he is.
Come on in. There he is.
We were just talking about you.
Yes.
We were thinking if your mouth was numb, Dennis, we can make you read out loud.
I don't think his mouth is numb.
Oh, darn.
We were hoping.
We were hoping. We were going to make you read or answer a question or something.
It's called torture. 6 o'clock torture.
All right. Everybody is totally afraid of the heart, so we're going to get over it right now. It is a pump. It has 2 chambers at the top, which are holding tanks, and 2 chambers at the bottom, which are pumps. It is nothing more than that, and it has tubes going from place to place. You don't need to know everything about the electrical system of the heart or anything else. We're going to go through some of the minor parts of it, but it is not a scary thing. But the cardiovascular system is made up of the heart and blood vessels. There are 3 types of blood vessels found in the human body. Arteries, and if you think of arteries as starting with A, they take blood away from the heart. And then there's veins. Veins bring blood back to the heart, and then there's capillaries, and this is where the oxygen and waste products exchange places. So the arteries take oxygenated blood away from the heart. The veins bring the blood back. Excuse me. So arteries are often depicted as being red in anatomical drawings because when they're full of oxygen, the blood appears to be redder. If you look at blood coming from a vein or venous blood, it has less oxygen, so it's typically a darker red, a purplish red. So those vessels are usually pictured as blue in any diagram. So the vessels, the arteries, get smaller as the arteries go out into the extremities, turning into what are called arterioles. And eventually they comprise the arterial side of the capillary bed. So we're going to look at some of our drawings that you had in your handouts. So the venous side of the circulation begins in the venous side of the capillary beds, enlarging to form venules and eventually forming veins. Most veins, this is really important, bring deoxygenated blood back to the heart, which is dark reddish brown in color. These, of course, are often depicted as blue in all your anatomical drawings. There is one vein in the body that carries oxygenated blood, and we're going to go over that, and you guys have to remember. And there's one artery in the human body that carries deoxygenated blood. All right, capillaries are tiny vessels, usually only a single cell layer thick. They are semi-permeable. In other words, they're kind of leaky. They've got holes in them and facilitate the exchange of fluids, oxygen, nutrients, and waste between local tissue and the bloodstream. So this is where, in the capillaries, this is where they drop off oxygen from the arterial side and they pick up garbage on the venous side. We're going to look at a picture and I'll explain it again. The adult heart is often compared to the size of the human fist, usually weighs just under 1 pound. The heart serves to pump blood to 2 distinct systems of circulation. You cannot think of it as one system. You have the pulmonary circulation, the first system, which receives the deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle via the right and left pulmonary artery. So guess if the blood is pumping from the heart and going to the lungs, it's going there. Why? Because it needs to drop off blood that's full of waste and pick up oxygen, which will come back through a vein. But we always say, well, all arteries have oxygenated blood in them. They do, except for those two. The left and right pulmonary artery contain deoxygenated blood because it's delivering that dirty blood, the blood with all the CO2 in it, back to the lungs to get refreshed with oxygen. So that's the only time you have deoxygenated blood in an artery. Then that blood is circulated through the right and left pulmonary vasculature in the lungs and sent back into the left atrium and heart through the right and left pulmonary veins. So if it's coming back after picking up oxygen, right, and it's coming back through veins, that is the only time you have oxygenated blood in a vein. So the only time you have deoxygenated blood in an artery is going to the lungs, coming back, it is oxygenated and it's in a vein. Why didn't they name them differently? Well, arteries are always a way, so if it's going from the heart to the lungs, that's a way. Veins are always returning. So when the pulmonary veins pump that blood back to the heart, that's the only time we ever have oxygenated blood in a vein unless you have a congenital anomaly. So oxygenated blood is pumped from the left side of the heart out to the systemic circulation from the left ventricle to the aorta. We're going to go through it in much more detail. So the heart is made up of muscle called the myocardium. The myocardial tissues are unique in that they are joined in a manner that allows the electrical impulses to pass very quickly across the muscle fibers. They are also unique in that the heart maintains its own electrical conduction system. It doesn't only contain its own electrical conduction system. It has its own arteries which serve to keep that muscle alive. So like your left anterior descending artery, that is an artery of the heart. Your right coronary artery, that is an artery of the heart. Your intermediary or intermedullary artery is an artery of the heart, and then there's a bunch of other little ones. So if you hear somebody having a coronary artery bypass graft, they're bypassing the arteries that feed the heart, not the systemic arteries that are outside in the body. Okay, so you've got this crazy picture. Where do we have a crazy picture like that in the book, Chris?
Page 182 of the CPT book.
Okay, so if I was to ask you specific questions about where blood is going, if it's going through this valve and if it's going through that valve and where's the right atrium and where's the right ventricle, and I was to ask you a question if blood is going from the right atrium to the right ventricle, what valve is it going through? And you're looking at that picture in CPT, are you going to be able to figure that out, or are you going to totally crack up and be nervous? You're not going to be able to figure it out. You're going to sit there and stare at it going, oh my God, SH, you know what, T. I am so lost. So that's a nice diagram.
It is.
But what you need to draw into your book, do we have a page you can figure out where we should put this? Draw it small. What page is that?
This is on page 180, so it's right before your cardiology starts.
And believe me, before you take the test, you better draw it into your book because you're not allowed to use your handouts on the test. And you guys are all in the honor system because what good would it do you to cheat? Now, I'm not just talking to my live class here, I'm talking to my online class. What good would it do you to cheat on any of the tests that I give you because you can't cheat on the national? Somebody's going to be standing there and you can't have those handouts. So this is in preparation for getting ready for the national. You have to put these diagrams in your book before you take a test. So if we look at this, this describes what we were talking about earlier. Blood comes back to the heart through the inferior and superior vena cava. It then gets pumped into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, you see that pulmonary artery, what color is it? Blue. So that pulmonary artery is blue because it has deoxygenated blood in it. So it's going to either lung, and here are the lung capillaries, not tissue capillaries, lung capillaries. This is where the exchange of waste and oxygen takes place. You inhale and fill that blood up with oxygen and some minor nitrogen and stuff. You exhale, and all that waste goes out when you breathe out, right? So now we've got this brand new charged blood, got all the oxygen we need in it, and it's coming back to the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. So that's the only time you have oxygenated blood in a vein. And it's because it's coming back that it's called a vein. So then it goes into the left atrium, and it goes through into the left ventricle, and it gets pumped out through the aorta to the rest of the body. The systemic arterial system. Systemic means everything besides the heart. All right, then, and we have arteries everywhere, right? But this is just simplified. Goes out the aorta, goes all the different arteries through our body, goes into arterioles, and then it comes down here where it meets up with the venous side in a capillary bed. So on this side, what happens? It drops off the oxygen to that part of the body. Let's say this is the abdomen. It drops off oxygenated blood to the abdomen, and on the other side of this capillary bed, the venous side, the wastes are picked up, and the wastes are taken back through veins, venules, first little ones, then veins, and then to the vena cava, and it starts the whole process over again. Okay, I think I have another picture.
When you draw that in your book, what I did with mine was I used red and blue. Use the red and blue pencil so that you can tell which is oxygenated and which is deoxygenated blood whenever you're going through your system.
Yeah, because if they ask you a question about...
Yes, absolutely. I would use red and blue.
If they asked you a question about what artery has deoxygenated blood in it, if you've got it drawn there in blue, you'll be able to see the pulmonary artery has no oxygen in that blood, right? All right, this is your most important diagram that you have to put on that same page. So you have to make these reasonably small. Now, remember that silly picture of the heart? And we were trying to figure out which valve it was going through? Blood comes back to the heart into the right atrium through what? The superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. That was on your homework assignment. You guys gave me some interesting answers.
I'm not even going to ask. We have a question.
You need a microphone, Janet. Hold on.
Oh, I know what she's got. On what these diagrams are in?
They're in your handouts.
These are the printed handouts that you should have done at the beginning of your class, of the anatomy handouts. They're all in those.
I have those. I just want to know what page you wanted us to put this on.
Oh, I'm sorry. On page 180 in the CPT book. Sorry, I misunderstood.
That's the best
you.
book because that's close to where that diagram of the heart is. When
Yeah.
we put diagrams in, we want to kind of put them in a place where they're in a neighborhood where it'll make sense to look for them. Okay, so we're returning the blood to the superior and inferior vena cava into the right atrium. And if I asked you a question about what valve is between the right atrium and the right ventricle, you would know it's the tricuspid, because you wouldn't be looking at that convoluted picture of the heart where you couldn't figure out what the heck what was where. Then if I said, this would be more typical of the question you would be asked, if blood was flowing backwards or regurgitating from the right ventricle to the right atrium, which valve would have the problem? Well, you're just going to look what's between the two, and you'll be able to answer the question. It's the tricuspid valve. Then you see from the right ventricle, it goes to the pulmonary valve, into the pulmonary artery. Then you have your exchange of waste and oxygen in the lung capillaries. This is what happens in the lungs. And then you have the blood going to the pulmonary vein. See how it's red? Going to the left atrium. Then from the left atrium to the left ventricle, it passes through the mitral valve. The other name for mitral valve, do we have a somewhere we can write this. Where's the valves in there?
Well, on this picture, it says mitral valve on it.
Okay, on that picture on page
182.
182 where it says mitral valve, I want you to write bicuspid. The other name for the mitral valve is the bicuspid
It's in the
valve.
center of the heart, on the right-hand side. Mitral valve.
You might have a simple question as just, what is the other name for a bicuspid valve? Mitral. What is the other name for the mitral valve? Bicuspid. But if you have it written there, you're not going to be trying to pull it out of your head, because believe me, your head is already leaving with you because you're in terror when you're taking that test. We're flight animals. When we get scared, we want to go. And we want to hurry up and answer the question and get it over with because you're terrified of it. And we're going to have to learn how to slow down, take a breath, and say, I know I have this information somewhere. Where is it? Don't answer questions without looking it up somewhere. Because if you try to answer it off the top of your head, you're actually pulling it out of a lower part of your body. Yes. And that is the truth. So if you know you can find the answer somewhere, go look for it, find it in black and white. Then when you answer that question, even if you spend an extra 15 seconds finding it, you've answered it with confidence. And believe it or not, taking that 15 or 20 seconds to find something is actually faster than sitting there staring at it going, oh my God, she said it in class. I can't remember what she said. I can't remember what it is. So, you wrote it down. It's going to be there. These are the simple ways to put an extra couple of points in your pocket when you're taking that national exam to assure that you're going to pass it. Okay, so that one's got to go in your book, and the one before it has to go in your book. All right, let's do the exercises which you should have done for 2.4.
Those diagrams are a lifesaver.
Yes. I remember when I took my test, I had the picture
Wow.
of the heart with the arrows, and I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to figure, oh my God.
You're total lifesavers on that
I
test.
can't even think.
And you'll use those diagrams several times on the test.
I have extreme test anxiety. I do well on tests because I've learned how to manage it. But I also know if you have simple tools that you can go to, it'll make it simpler for you. As you're taking the test, you'll build confidence. And as you build confidence, you do better and better and better. All right, number one, the heart receives deoxygenated blood in the right atrium via which vessel? It will be the inferior and superior vena cava. The heart circulates blood through the lungs and is sent back into the left atrium of the heart via which vessel? The left and right pulmonary veins. Notice they wrote questions about everything we were talking about. So, and since they write this book and these questions, they also write your exam. What is the term for inflammation of the heart and vessels? Angiocarditis, because we're not just talking about the heart. Carditis would be what? Just the heart itself. Pericarditis is surrounding the heart. Angiocarditis is the whole system. 4, what is the inner layer of the heart? It is the endocardium, because endo means within. Number 5, what is cyanosis caused by? B, oxygen deficiency. If you're turning blue, you're not getting enough oxygen.
Everybody good on those questions? Okay.
Okay, so that's the heart, basically. That's what you need to understand about the heart. It's called the myocardium. You need to understand the pericardium surrounds the heart. You need to understand that there are 2 pumps, which are the ventricles, 2 holding tanks, which are the atriums. The left side is where the oxygenated blood comes in and gets pumped out. The right side is where the deoxygenated blood comes into the holding tank, goes down to the ventricle, gets pumped to the lungs. If I ask you a question about where in the vascular system the waste and oxygen is exchanged, I'm not talking about pulmonary, am I? So what's the name for those capillaries in the vascular system where the waste and oxygen takes place. It's on your diagram. You got it, tissue capillaries. If you say capillaries, you'll get it wrong.
Say bed.
All right, lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is comprised of lymph vessels and nodes. This system serves to collect excess fluid from the interstitial spaces, a potential space between tissues, and returns it to the heart. So the lymphatic system has the job of protecting our body, right? But it also has the job of picking up excess fluid that the venous system can't quite get back to where it needs to go. So the arteries normally push fluid out into the capillary beds, but the venous side cannot always keep up with the reabsorption of all the excess fluid, and the lymph picks up the surplus. So this system operates without a pump by using a series of valves to ensure that the fluid travels in one direction back to the heart. If you don't move around, since it doesn't have a pump, and lymph tends to be moved by muscle movement, so if you're somebody who's bedridden or you have congestive heart failure and you're pretty sedate and you're not moving around, you notice people that have CHF or that have been sitting around a lot, can't get out of bed, what happens to their ankles and their hands? They swell up. So the lymph system needs to have muscle movement to facilitate moving that lymph back up where it needs to go. The arteries have a pump. So it's going to pump them. And the veins get pumped by pulse action. So every time your heart beats, it pushes the blood back up through the veins. In the veins, there's these little kind of flaps. So your heart beats, you have a pulse, blood moves up, the little trapdoor shuts. Next time the heart pumps, trapdoors open, everything moves up in increments until it gets where it needs to go. That's why if you cut yourself in a vein, it's not that big a deal, right? Unless it's a major vein. But you cut yourself in an artery, that's under high pressure. It's getting pumped, and that's why if you have an arterial bleed, it's a serious condition. All right, the lymphatic vessels are structured in similar fashion to blood vessels. Lymphatic capillaries are different, and they are closed off at the end. And we're going to look at a picture. Once the lymph fluid is picked up, it is circulated to increasingly large lymph vessels called lymphatic venules. The lymphatic venules eventually enlarge into lymphatic veins that empty their content into either. Now, this is something you need to know. Where do these veins empty their content? Well, the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct. There's two places they enter into. Both of these ducts are situated in the thoracic cavity. So the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. And I'll tell you where they get that from in the next two slides. We get into the coronary circulatory system, the system for the heart, when we get to Chapter 10. We'll get deeper into that because we're going to be doing procedures on it. So, all right. So if we look at this, the end of a lymph capillary is dead-ended, right? Doesn't go anywhere. If you look at, this is a tissue capillary, you guys. So this is the venous side of a tissue capillary. And this is the arterial side of the tissue capillary. And look what's wound in between of all those tissue capillaries. You've got lymph vessels in there, and they're picking up all this excess fluid and stuff and returning it to the heart. And the way it's going to return it is the right lymphatic duct collects from the right arm and right side of the head and right side of the thorax. You should write that somewhere. The right lymphatic duct collects from the right arm, the right side of the head, and the right side of the thorax. The thoracic duct collects lymph from everywhere else. So right side, right arm, right side of head, right side of thorax. In order for the body to maintain an appropriate volume of circulating blood, it is necessary to put all of this fluid back into the main system of circulation. Because what happens if we don't keep the fluid moving or it doesn't get where it needs to go? Your blood pressure drops. You may not end up with blood to your brain if you don't keep the system pressurized. Okay, you're going to want to make those notes in your CPT book, for sure, because on the national exam, they're going to ask you a question. There's almost always a question about the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct, and you need to know what they do. All right, both of the lymphatic ducts empty their contents into the subclavian vein. The right lymphatic vein empties into the right subclavian vein, and the thoracic duct empties into the left subclavian vein. Okay, next week, before we do the exam review, Chris and I are going to be doing book check to make sure you've actually put these diagrams in your book. So it is mandatory before next Wednesday that these diagrams are in your CPT book and that your notes are in your CPT book that I've been telling you to put in there. So if you come in here and you haven't done it, I'm going to be suspicious about how you passed my test without having them in there, because the questions that I've written for this exam have to do with using those diagrams. All right. The spleen is an organ of the lymphatic system that sits in the upper abdomen. Where is Lymph Man?
He is on page 404 in the CPT book.
So you're going to want to make the notes about the lymphatic system near, I don't have any lymph women or spine women, or it's all men. So Lymph Man is at 404.
We never do women.
No,
we never say lymph
say
women.
Lymph Man or
Skeleton man.
skeleton man, or we do have a female urinary woman.
We do. We do have a female
Urinary person.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's a really good place to write your thoracic duct and all that information. That's an excellent place to write it. So when you're transferring those notes from the slides we just had, please put that information in there so you have it for an exam. Not necessarily my exam, but the national exam.
And on page 405 there, you have almost like a full page that's blank, so you can put a lot of notes there, which you'll have about the lymph system.
All right, so the spleen is an organ of the lymphatic system that sits in the upper abdomen. It serves as a blood-forming organ early in life and later as a storage unit for extra red blood cells and platelets. You know, for a long time we had no idea what it did. All we knew is if we ruptured it, we could live without it. But for many years, they didn't understand what the spleen did. Its main function is to act as a filter that identifies and destroys red blood cells that are no longer efficient. So it's a pretty important part of the lymph system. Diagram on 184. Yeah, that's a pretty good one, too. I like that. 184 has a diagram of a lot of things. So, in fact, we're going to look at another diagram now, and we'll compare to that one. We can put notes there. So my diagram that I gave you shows, it's a woman, too.
It's a woman.
We have the thymus gland. We have the spleen. You have bone marrow, lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes. These are all part of the lymph system. And on that diagram, if you look to the right of the diagram, there's a little patch on top of what's part of the small intestine. Does everybody see that on their diagram? It's the second box down. Do I have yours boxed? I don't think I have it boxed. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the sixth thing down on your diagram.
Right under
On
small
the right.
intestine.
Right under small intestine. And throughout our intestines, because we come into contact with so much bacteria, salmonella, potential, things that can make us ill, a tremendous amount of our lymph system is actually in the small intestine, and they're called Peyer's patch, P-E-Y-E-R-S, patch, and it's on your list. And those Peyer's patches are on your small intestine, throughout your small intestine, to protect you from getting things like salmonella and food poisoning and different bacteria. Because, you eat food, and even though you assume it's clean and that it's absolutely free of everything, it isn't. So your body spends a lot of time trying to protect you from microbials and things that you might ingest. Everybody find the Peyer's patch on their diagram? Okay, draw it in on that page that Dennis was telling about.
184.
184 is a really good place to draw it in. All right. Exercise 2.5. How does the lymphatic system work to ensure the fluid travels one way back to the heart? With a system of one-way valves. C. Wouldn't be gravity, right? Or what would happen? All your lymph would be in your feet. You'd have to stand on your head. A lot of these questions, even on the national exam, if you just look at them, you can kind of tough it out and find the right answer just by thinking about it. Gravity would be totally stupid if it used gravity. I mean, we'd all have huge feet and nothing up here. All right. The lymphatic system operates without a pump by using a series of valves to ensure the fluid travels in one direction back to the heart. Number 2, what type of cell is housed by the lymphatic system to help the body's defense system? B, phagocytes. And I think of these as Pac-Men. And it begins with P, too. So think about them. They're going through the body, and they're trying to defend us from all kinds of microbials and bacteriums. So a lymphoid organ scattered throughout the body house phagocytic cells and lymphocytes, which are essential to the body's defense system. It wasn't any of you guys, but I want to say something today before we get further to my online students as well. There is nothing more frustrating to me, and it happened to me today on an ICD-9 worksheet, so I don't want it to happen in this class. I do a lot of cussing and swearing in the morning because I'm grading, and I'm going, geez, Louise, but not really that, a lot worse. You do not leave anything blank on an end-of-chapter assignment. You make an effort to look up the answer somewhere. These were ICD-9 codes that that person was totally capable of looking up, but it was a tough thing to code. At least give me one code to make me think that you cared enough to try. I was so mad this morning. There were like 36 questions, and 12 of them were blank, and they were all the hardest ones. So you guys, and you can use your resources when you're doing the end of chapter things. You can use the internet. You can use a medical terminology book, because the reason I give you those exercises, it's not a test. It's so I can see what you're learning and whether or not you're learning how to use your resources. So it's not cheating to do research to answer those end of chapter questions. So please, 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 do the best you can to give me the best possible answer, and do not intentionally leave an answer blank, or you are going to hear from me. I put it in caps I'm so frustrated with students who do not fill in answers. Please I'm turning this back to a draft. You must re-upload this assignment with answers in it.
At least try and do
I
your
mean,
best.
Give me one code.
Something,
One code that even is close. The woman had a baby. She had a complication. I mean, you could have given me the V27.2 code that said she had a baby. I mean, that would have made me a happy camper. Something. But nothing's more frustrating to an instructor to have somebody who just says, nah, too much trouble.
It's too hard.
Yeah, that's what Ed said this morning. He says, too hard.
Yeah.
I said, these are adults. They're not children. If they want this, they should do it. What procedure is performed when the spleen is removed? Splenectomy. D. Splen or spleno is the root word for spleen, so if you add ectomy, that's what you get, right? Removal of the spleen. And we can remove part of it as well. If only part of the spleen is removed from a patient under 12 years of age, it can regenerate. Isn't that amazing? The liver we know regenerates. Now they're trying to figure out what are in the cells of the liver and the cells of the spleen when the child is 12 years of age or younger, that we can regenerate that organ. Because if they can figure out why that can happen, they can do it with every organ in our body, and we'll be able to produce our own new heart, our own new kidney, our own new whatever within our abdomen, and then when it's fully grown and ready, they will be able to replace your heart or whatever with your own grown organ, which means you will not be on immunosuppressive drugs forever so you don't reject it. It's going to be the most amazing thing. And it's being done right now in North Carolina between UNC and Duke. They've got a cooperative thing that they're trying to figure out how to do this. So let's hope they get it done. Number 4, what is the name of one of the structures the lymphatic ducts empty their contents into? Would be B, the subclavian veins. So both of the lymphatic ducts empty their contents into the subclavian veins. The lymphatic duct empties in the right subclavian vein, the lymphatic duct, and the thoracic duct empties into the left subclavian vein. Okay, number 5. What condition causes inflammation of lymphatic vessels as a result of a bacterial infection? It is going to be B, lymphanginitis.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, maybe somebody's trying to get us. It sounds like somebody who is desperate. So lymphanginitis is the inflammation of lymphatic vessels as a result of a bacterial infection. It appears as painful red streaks under the skin. Do you ever see, you see people say, oh, if you get a red streak from somewhere that you've got blood poisoning? That's what that is. It's an infection, basically, caused by a bacteria that causes red streaks. All right, the respiratory system is also known as the pulmonary system. It includes nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, bronchi, and their smaller branches, lungs, and alveoli. It's everything from taking air in and sending air out, and everything in the lungs. So the respiratory system functions to exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen. Air is inspired through the nose and mouth. We breathe in the air from our nose and our mouth. It passes to the lungs through a series of branching airways known as bronchial tree. This connects the lungs to the outside air containing the oxygen. At the smallest branch of the bronchial tree, the airways are called bronchioles. So it goes bronchi to bronchioles. Each of these bronchioles narrow further until they end in a tiny pouch called an alveolar sac, or the alveoli. Gases are exchanged across the single-cell layer of tissue comprising the alveolar sac into the pulmonary circulation. These are our pulmonary capillaries. They're also permeable and a single layer thick. So in other words, they leak. So oxygen can go out and waste can go out and oxygen can come in. So they form that bed that we looked at earlier around each alveoli, and the exchange of gases happens effortlessly between the alveoli and the capillaries through a principle of diffusion. In other words, molecules flow from levels of high concentration to lower concentration. When you took chemistry or anatomy physiology, you learn that molecules are moving around at a rapid rate, and they kind of like to get away from each other. So there's a lot of pressure when you get a lot of them in one place, so their tendency is to go out where there isn't a lot of pressure. All right, so you have this diagram as well. You should be aware of what the paranasal sinuses are. All right, I want you all to do, we're going to do an experiment right now. In your CPT book, I want you to see if you can find me the names of the 4 paranasal sinuses in your CPT book. And where would you find them? Fastest way would be look at your index and look for a procedure that has to do with sinuses. It's on page 163 in my book. Did you guys find it? And how would you know that? Because it's in the respiratory system. So if you find the respiratory system codes, there's going to be pictures there of the sinuses. So is there any reason why you wouldn't know that it's the frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary if it was on the national exam? Because you're not going to try to pull it out of you know where. You're going to go look for it and find the answer. Then if you turn the page, you have respiratory man. And it has a lot of the same things that I have here, but it doesn't have like the laryngopharynx and all of that. So it's a really good idea before you take our test that you transfer all the things that are on this drawing that I gave you in the handout into your book on page 164. So you should know where the trachea is, where the laryngopharynx is, where the mediastinum is, and take a look at the lining of the lungs, which is called pleura. And we've got the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura. How many of you read trash novels, beach novels? Come on, fess up.
Nobody. There's no hands.
All right. In some movies, in some books, in some things, they always say, oh, I have such a visceral feeling, like a gut feeling. That's a deep feeling. So it's the deeper layer. The outermost layer of something would be the parietal layer, not the visceral layer. If they're talking about visceral, they're talking about deep. You'll never forget that now, right? Because you'll always think of a trash novel when you're thinking about
Visceral.
parietal layer versus visceral layer. All right. Then we have the bronchi. You can see it comes off of the trachea, and it comes, you have the bronchi here, and they get smaller and smaller, which are your bronchioles. And then those bronchioles end in, see the bronchioles here? This is a blown up picture of it. They end in the alveoli. And what do we have surrounding the alveoli? We have the pulmonary capillaries. So this is where the exchange of oxygen and waste materials take place. And the hemoglobin, or the erythrocytes, drop off CO2 on the the blue side, and then on the other side it picks up O2. And that O2 is returned in a vein, not an artery. It's coming back to the heart. So it'll be in the pulmonary veins. Oh, I've got a really cool picture I didn't give you. Used to give it out, and somebody told me it was totally gross, and they didn't want the picture. So, if you're not into the human body and doing autopsies, you would think it was gross. But I thought it was cool. So, here's a person who's been cut in half. And it's the most interesting thing. You can see the oropharynx, the epiglottis, the laryngopharynx. You see the epiglottis here? What does that do? That keeps us from breathing in food. Because when we're swallowing food, we don't want it to go into our lungs. So that flaps down and keeps food from going into your lungs and keeps you from aspirating food. Here's the hyoid bone. It's been cut in half. The thyroid cartilage or Adam's apple, the trachea cut in half, the cricoid cartilage, your esophagus, and the soft palate. I just think it's a cool picture. I was very fortunate. My daughter-in-law attended the University of Arizona Medical School, and I got to go play in the anatomy lab. So my husband was totally grossed out. Him and my son left and went somewhere else. And we spent hours in there. It was so fun. All right, let's do exercise 2.6.
It's a great picture.
Isn't it a cool picture?
Yeah.
It's even cooler when you see it in person. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Subcarinal means beneath the carina. Where is the carina located? The answer is D, at the bifurcation of the trachea into two bronchi. So at the last cartilage of the trachea, there's a spar of cartilage projecting posteriorly from its inner face, marking the point where the trachea branches into the two main bronchi. Number 2. Oh, the cartilage projection is the carina. Number 2, which structure is responsible for moistening, warming, and filtering inspired air? Your nose. The nose is responsible for providing an airway to breathe, moistening, warming, and filtering inspired air, serving as a resonating chamber of speech and housing the smell receptors. Number 3, what is a thoracotomy? B, incision into the chest. The root word thoraco means chest. The suffix otomy means cutting into. So a thoracotomy is making an incision into the chest. It doesn't mean taking anything out. It just means cutting into it. Number 4, where is gas exchanged and moved from the respiratory system into the circulatory system? The alveoli and capillaries. So gases are exchanged across the single cell layer of tissue comprising the alveolar sac into the pulmonary circulation. The capillaries from the pulmonary circulation are also a single cell layer thick. So be aware, pulmonary capillaries versus tissue capillaries. Tissue capillaries are in the vascular system, not in the pulmonary system. They form a bed around each alveoli. Gas is exchanged between the alveoli and the capillaries via the principle of diffusion. Number 5, which suffix means breathing? B. The suffix "nia" means breathing. You can derive this from the list of definitions I think it's on page 25. It may have moved. Each definition related to breathing is for a word ending in "nia." You don't pronounce the P. Okay, this is a real short anatomy physiology session because now we're moving to digestive. All right. The feeding tube begins in the mouth and ends at the anus. It is a continuous structure, winds its way down through several body cavities, encompasses a multitude of structures and organs. The function of the system is to mechanically and chemically break food down into minuscule or molecular sizes so that it can be absorbed into the bloodstream and utilized at the cellular level. You know, if we took the time to actually chew our food well, We would have less digestive problems, and we would actually not gain as much weight. So by taking the time to actually chew your food very well, you'll absorb the nutrients, and by doing so, you take the time to actually start feeling full. We actually don't start feeling full until we've been full for about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you're gobbling your food down, you're not going to feel full until you've overeaten. Biggest problem with me, I'm always on the run, and I'm jamming food in my mouth and heading as fast as I can to the next thing I've got to do. All right, this you need to write down near Digestive Man. Where is Digestive Man?
I don't have my book right now. She's borrowing it.
Oh,
So I'll
you may
use
borrow
yours
mine.
for a second.
You need to write down the ancillary organs of the
It's gonna be on
digestive
page
system.
252 in your CPT book.
Okay, so the ancillary organs, such as the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, are also included as part of the digestive system. The rationale for this is that they are needed for the enzymes from the pancreas and bile from the liver gallbladder that are used to chemically break down food. Oh, sure. Are you running low? I know you should be just a little behind me in dead batteries. Ready? All right, the esophagus joins the stomach at the cardiac orifice. That's important to know. You should put it on your diagram. Is it in there?
It is not, well, your esophagus is in there, but it doesn't say anything about the
Okay.
cardiac orifice.
So where it joins the stomach is called the cardiac orifice. The fundus of the stomach is the rounded upper portion of the stomach. The body is the main portion, and the pyloric antrum is the lower portion. So they don't have any of that there.
No.
So write that in.
It's on page 252, right? Yes. Let's see if there was a better picture in here, but I don't see one. Nope.
So we got it. We got the cardiac orifice. We got the fundus is the upper rounded part. And then the body of the stomach is the main portion. And then the pyloric antrum is the lower portion of the stomach. I got the most interesting answers on my question that refers to the small intestine. Okay, you guys, the small intestine is divided into 3 sections. The first 1/3 is superior, right? Because it's at the top, because it comes from the stomach. And that's the duodenum. The second 1/3 of the middle is the jejunum, and the distal 1/3 is the ileum. If I asked you to name it from the bottom up, inferior to superior, you should have said ileum, jejunum, and duodenum. I know, you read it right. But some of you, the jejunum doesn't move. It's always going to be in the middle. But the thing is that I give you that question that way because it teaches you about what the questions may be like on the national exam. They're not going to ask you simple, like from top to bottom. They're going to ask you like from bottom to top, or which one is what's the middle third. They're not going to ask you something that's so easy. They're going to ask you stuff that messes with you, that makes you question yourself. What did I just read? What do they want to know? All right, when coding for endoscopies of the large intestine, it's important to know the extent of the large intestine examined. The endoscopy begins at the rectum for a proctosigmoidoscopy. The exam goes into the sigmoid colon. So if you look at the diagram I gave you of the GI tract, for a sigmoidoscopy, the examination goes through the sigmoid colon and possibly into a portion of the descending colon. For a colonoscopy, the entire colon is examined.
If you look on page 279, let me show them that in the book.
Yeah.
Page 279 in the CPT book, it'll give you definitions of those. Do you want this
Right.
to look?
No, it's okay. When we do get into the GI tract, I'm going to give you actual centimeters, how far that scope goes, and if it goes beyond that many centimeters, then it is going to be the next thing. And if it goes beyond that, it's going to be the next thing. So I gave you this diagram as well, and you need to be aware, and on that diagram, you guys, there's a couple of things that are not in your diagram in CPT. So if you look at your diagram in CPT, see the transverse colon? Look at the transverse colon on your handout. On the right side of the picture, on the transverse colon, that's called the splenic flexure. On the left side of the picture, it's the hepatic flexure. But the left side of the picture is actually the right side of the person, right? Because when you're looking at the front of somebody, your right is their left, and your left is their right. So the liver or hepatic flexure is actually on the human body's right side, and the splenic flexure is actually on the human body's left side. And you know what I do when I'm trying to remember, when I'm looking at a diagram? I actually put right here and left here. So I remember when I'm looking at that picture, the left side of the body is on the right side of the picture, and the right side of the body is on the left side of the picture. Because what if they ask you which side of the body is the majority of the liver on? And if you look at the picture and you go, oh, it's the left. It's not. It's the right. So put that little R and L on there, and it'll keep you from messing up. All right, 2.7. What is the term for the first 1/3 of the small intestine? It's going to be the duodenum or duodenum, depending on who your teacher was. So the first 1/3 of the small intestine is the duodenum, the second is the jejunum, and the distal is the ileum. There are 2 ileums in our body. There's the ilium, which is a bone in your pelvis, and there's the ileum, which is part of your small intestine. The way you remember this, Christy, I have to give Christy Louderback credit because she came up with this. The ilium is, the I is straight like a bone, so it's a bone. The ileum, the E is kind of wiggly like an intestine. That is the ileum that belongs to the small intestines. Now, I'm going to get on your cases if you spell things wrong on the test. And the reason I'm going to do that is the AAPC will give you 2 spellings of something, like ilium and ileum, and expect you to get it right. So if you don't start concentrating on your spelling when you answer a question, I will take points off. So when you answer a question and it has to do with a bone somewhere in the body or the alveoli or the alveolar, get it right. You're looking at a picture where it's got the word right there. Type it exactly as you see it. All right, where is bile produced? It's produced in the liver, but it's stored in the gallbladder. So the bile is secreted into the intestines from the gallbladder and helps the body to digest fats. Number 3, which part of the large intestine is between the hepatic flexure and the splenic flexure? The transverse colon. The ascending colon proceeds from the ileocecal valve upward to the hepatic flexure, becomes the transverse colon, and then turns downward to become the descending colon at the splenic flexure. And see, I didn't spell it right either.
I was going to say, you're spelling
God,
wrong.
you're bad, Lynn. S-P-L-E-N-I-C. I am the worst when it comes to typing, I swear to God. All right. Number 4. Which medical term refers to the cheek? It is A, buccal. How would you know that? Look up buccal in the back of the index of the CPT. If you have no idea what buccal means, if you look up the word in the back of your index of CPT, it will take you to a procedure being done on the person's cheek. You're going to try to learn how to use your CPT and ICD-9 books as if they're medical terminology books. You think, well, if they ever do something to something named bucca or buccal, it's got to be back there somewhere, right? And it'll take you to a CPT code, and a description in that code will hopefully help you to realize that that pertains to the cheek. Okay, so buccal means cheek. Buccal is relating to the cheek. Buccal swabs can be used for DNA testing. All right. Food moves through the digestive tract by what means? Peristalsis. Wave-like contractions called peristalsis move food through the digestive tract. The urinary system, the production of urine from the excretion of a metabolic waste along with fluid and electrolyte balance, is the main function of the urinary system. This system also provides transportation and temporary storage of urine prior to the intermittent process of urination. The key structures of this system are the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. So the kidneys also secrete some hormones giving it an endocrine function as well, but it is not part of the endocrine system. The male and female urethras are quite different anatomically. One's shorter than the other, and they're in different positions in the body. However, they still perform the same function and are treated similarly for many surgical procedures in CPT. However, when you're looking up a urethral procedure in CPT, they're going to be divided by male and female. So on the AAPC test, what are they going to try to sell you? If you're doing a male urethral procedure, they're going to put the first code offered to you is going to say urethra female, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to see the word urethra and pick it and run down the road and get it wrong. So you've got to be really careful because you've got the male and female urethra are different, so procedures that apply to them are going to be different. And the way we do them is going to be different. Also, you want to make sure you're differentiating between a ureter and a urethra. Because if your mind is going really fast and you look at the word ureter or urethra, you might end up picking a urethra code when you should be looking for a ureter code. So in the human body, whether we're female or male, we have two kidneys. What sits on top of the kidneys are the adrenal glands, and they don't have that on Kidney Man in the CPT book.
Page 304.
Page 304, draw those puppies in there. Adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys. They're part of the endocrine system, but they rest on the kidney. When we study the male genitourinary system...
What page? Is that what you're asking me?
Put the adrenal glands on top of those kidneys.
Adrenal glands, yeah.
Yeah, when we studied the genitourinary system for the male, it's like real quick. Not as many working parts. But when we study the female side, part of the genitourinary system for the female is all of her reproductive organs. So there's a lot more information that we have to understand. All right, so the female has the kidneys, same, two ureters, one on each side. But we also have, and we have the urinary bladder, but we also have the uterus. We have a shorter urethra, and we have the fallopian tubes, and we have the ovaries. You have a female picture? Yes.
On page 331 of the CPT book is the female one. Page 331, 331. You're welcome.
All right, ladies. I have had a student walk out of here after taking the national exam that couldn't remember that their vagina was internal. Honest to God, I'll never forget that day as long as I live. You remember? Oh, my God, I answered that question wrong. They asked me what was included in the female internal genitalia, and I put something other than vagina. Why was I so nervous I couldn't remember where my vagina was? So that's how nervous you're going to get on the test. So just be prepared. All right, for the female genitalia, the external is vulva, labia majora and minora, clitoris, introitus, which is the opening of the urethra or urinary meatus, Skene's glands and Bartholin's glands, those are all on the outside of our body. Our internal parts of the female genitalia include the vagina, uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. For men, the external portion of the testes, the epididymis, the scrotum, and the penis. Internal includes the prostate gland, seminal vesicles, Cowper's glands, vas deferens, ejaculatory ducts, and urethra. So if you don't have a clear picture in your CPT, and I didn't give you a clear enough picture, use the internet this weekend, look for diagrams, and add more information to your CPT diagrams. You don't have to just use what I gave you. The more you use Google and Bing or whatever, and the more you look at diagrams online, the better you're going to be prepared. The more detail you can add to your information that's in your CPT book, the better you're going to do on the test. Now, don't forget, you also have really cool color diagrams in the front of your ICD-9 book and HCPCS book.
And HCPCS.
But what I suggest, if you find a really good picture in HCPCS or ICD-9, take the number of that picture and write it next to urinary man in the CPT. Say, C diagram, HCPCS, page 8, or C diagram, ICD-9, page 8, so that you know you have a much better picture in the HCPCS. But you're not going to have time to be going, oh my God, where's that picture? So if you put all the references in your CPT diagram next to endocrine man or next to lymph man, and then you say, go see HCPCS page 8, you'll know that there's more information on that page that you can use for the test. When you're taking the national exam, you typically keep your ICD-9 book up above the test because that's what you're going to be using for a medical dictionary and looking at diagrams all the time. So that's a really good one to reference to, is your ICD-9 book. All right, the main role for these organs is to reproduce. The role of the male reproductive system is to donate a 23-chromosome gamete called sperm, and one role of the female reproductive system is to donate the 23-chromosome gamete called the egg. Both the male and female reproductive organs include the external and internal genitalia we just talked about. So the external genitalia for the male, again, is the testes, epididymis, scrotum, and penis. Internal organs for the male genital system include the prostate glands, seminal vesicles, Cowper's glands, which secrete fluid to nourish and enhance sperm. There's also a system of tubes and ducts that sperm travels through to leave the body, and it's comprised of the vas deferens, the ejaculatory duct, and the urethra. Then the external genitalia for the female, including the vulva, clitoris, external opening for the vagina is also called the introitus. The opening of the urethra or urinary meatus, the Skene's glands, which are found on either side of the urinary meatus, and the Bartholin's glands found on either side of the introitus. And the internal organs, do not forget, vagina, uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. I'll never forget that day. I laughed so hard. I can't, that's exactly what you said. I cannot believe I forgot where my vagina is. I said, excuse me? Because I'm thinking, where did that come from? She said, it was a question on the test, and I got it wrong. I know I got it wrong. All right, 2.8. It's just straight out of the air. You know, we're all stressed out, sitting here, wrapping up the test. All right, which anatomical structure in the urinary system differs in position and in length between the male and female? I hope you all say urethra. They're very similar in their functions, but they're different in size. Number 2, what is the primary function of the urinary system? It is the excretion of metabolic waste and fluid electrolyte balance. The production of urine for the excretion of metabolic waste along with the fluid and electrolyte balance is the main function of the system. The system also provides transportation and temporary storage of urine prior to the intermittent process of urination. It is one of the cleanest fluids that will ever leave your body. Urine is very sanitary. What is the structure? What structure is an internal organ for the male genital system? It would be the Cowper's glands. And those are the glands that help to add fluid to the sperm. The internal organs for the male genital system include prostate, seminal vesicle, Cowper's glands. The Cowper's glands is also called bulbourethral glands. So write that down next to a diagram. Cowper's glands are also called bulbourethral gland.
You've got the male genitalia on page 324 of your CPT book.
It is a small gland that secretes part of the seminal fluid.
Page 324. I don't see Cowper's gland in there, though. Let's see if
Does it show the bulbourethral gland?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so that's one of your homework assignments is to look it up on the internet and find out where you're supposed to write that. But put somewhere Cowper's gland equals bulbourethral gland. And if you write it on that page, you'll get it right. And the Cowper's gland secretes part of the seminal fluid.
Tom?
Okay, we're going to do a couple more questions, then we'll take a break. Number 4, what is the medical term for congenital defect in which the urethra opens on the dorsum of the penis? It is B, epispadias. Epispadias is a congenital defect in which the urethra opens on the dorsal side of the penis, and hypospadias is a congenital defect in which the urethra opens on the underside of the penis. Epi is on or over, hypo meaning under or below. Where are the Bartholin's glands found? Either side of the introitus in the female, so either side of the opening to the vagina. All right, we're going to go to break, and then we'll come back and work on, I believe, the eye.